So these examples were all shot using the help of the Wemacro Rail here. This is what we're going to review here today, guys, as well as give you a tutorial and a breakdown of what it takes to use this thing in terms of extreme macro photography. If you are new to macro and you're thinking about investing into the macro ecosystem, just know that you're going to have to bring your patience in macro in general and in this video, guys. It's not going to be a short one, so buckle up as we talk about the theory and, of course, how to use this thing to get the most out of it. So this is the Wemacro Rail here, guys. It is a relatively budget or inexpensive way to get going and take some great shots of extreme macro photography. Now, if you're not aware, our biggest challenge in macro photography and definitely in extreme macro photography is the depth of field. It's getting everything that we want in focus, and to do that at extreme magnifications, we're going to have to rely on focus stacking. That's what a macro rail allows us to do, is focus stack so that we can go into post later and basically stitch all of our photos together to give us one nice photo with everything in focus. That's the very basics of macro photography in a nutshell. So this is the Wemacro Rail. It is a fantastically made and, again, relatively inexpensive, around $300 US macro rail. And it definitely might seem a bit intimidating if you're just getting into the macro universe. Don't worry, I'm going to show you everything that you need to get going relatively easily. So yes, it does have a great build quality. It's got a ton of different customization options for mounting and for your accessories, which of course the sky is the limit. It does come at a pretty hefty weight and it's well made. It's made completely of metal. Your motor's back here. It's got, of course, a power source that you're going to need to plug in. And it's definitely got everything that you're kind of looking for in terms of adjustment. That is available to you, but you are probably going to need a few accessories that I'd recommend. One being at bare minimum, something like this Z bracket here that you can kind of adjust your angle of approach, because if you don't have something like this, you're going to pretty much rely on this thing being completely flat, so your subject is going to be right in front of you. Now, of course, you can use something like this little included tripod with these little teeth here to kind of reposition and move that, but it's great to have an option at both sides. So if you want to move this, or maybe you have an uncooperative subject, or it's, you know, very delicate, you're going to want to be able to move your actual macro rail as much as you can. So something like this is going to run you maybe 30 or 40 bucks. I'll throw a link down in the description. And that's what I would definitely recommend to get you going if you don't decide to go out and just get one of the big, huge, very heavy, very big ways to kind of manipulate this if you want to throw it up or down. There's lots of stands and whatnot that you can get for this piece of equipment. So on the top here, it does have a removable base for your camera here. That's going to be great. It's going to thread right on there. You're going to throw that on your camera, and you're going to have a quick release plate so that if you did need to move it or take it off or what have you, or swap your cameras, you're able to do that. So in terms of the mechanism itself, it's very simple. It's just a little motor, and it's just going to move this rail back and forth. And the beauty of this thing is it's going to let you control it incredibly precisely. And that's where this thing comes in and really shines compared to something like maybe a manual macro rail like this guy here. And I've used this for years. This is just again, a very relatively inexpensive macro rail. And you're able to move it back and forth, left and right by hand. And that is going to create some issues on its own. Of course, with your hand, with movement, it's not very stable. The measurements are not very precise. Although I've gotten some great results with it, this is just taking things to a completely different level. So yes, these are available, but in terms of the seriousness of your art and what you want out of it, and again, we're dealing with a very, very small depth of field. So whether you're doing macro photography starting at 1:1 or getting into micro photography using very, very high magnification lenses, this thing's got you covered. The ability for it to move forward and backwards at extremely precise measurements and very small increments is going to be the difference between getting a mediocre shot and just a fantastic shot. So yeah, this thing really can do it all. And like I said, this is one of the least expensive options on the market. The sky is the limit, and they have their pros and their cons, of course. But for me, again, I pretty much chose this one based on cost. And I didn't really see the need to go and spend double or even triple or quadruple what this thing costs. So in terms of value, and well, you saw the results. I think it's great in terms of value. So now let's dive in and look at some of the things that are included with this. I myself was a little bit overwhelmed, and I think you will be too, because it doesn't really come with a carrying case or anything. You're gonna have to put one of those together yourself. So what I did is I went out and got something like this. It's a hard case, but it has the foam insert. So what you can do is basically make your own setup for this thing and make a spot for every little piece of equipment. And again, you got to take into account the accessories as well. So now I have a spot for this thing to go, because yeah, it can be a bit delicate and there are a lot of cords and pieces for it. So that's what I did. I'd recommend doing something like that. Otherwise it's just going to be strewn out everywhere. And yeah, that's no good. It's also worth noting that there are a few different configurations when you're ordering this online, and it's important to order it with the cable that suits your camera. So in my case, I'm a Sony shooter and a newer Sony shooter, so it's important that you get the Sony cable if that's similar to something that you shoot. Just know that there's a few different options available, so look online to see the one that fits your camera's needs. So now let's talk about actually using this thing, and there are a few great options to use it, including an app, which I do prefer, because if you're on the move, or well, if you don't have access to a computer, you can just use the Bluetooth function and hook this thing right up to your phone and have that app, which is really convenient and handy and relatively intuitive. So there is a learning curve, of course, but today I'm going to focus on using the app and showing you how all that works. But just know that you can basically do the same thing, hook it up to your computer and watch in real time. You can also connect it to Helicon Focus, which is a paid third-party software, and use Helicon Remote to take full control at the computer. For simplicity's sake and for this video, I'm going to show you how to use it in the app. And here we are in the app. It's quite simple. It's a little bit intuitive, but there is some things to note here. So we're going to go down line by line and show you the settings that I use and some things that you might want to consider if you are going to be using this app. So let's start at the top here where it says settling time. This is on page 1, and this is where we're going to dial in our settings. And when we hit confirm at the bottom there, that's going to tell the unit exactly what we want out of it. So settling time here is set to 3 seconds. That's going to be the time in between the movement and the shot, allowing the time for the camera and whatnot to settle to help eliminate or reduce any camera shake or vibration that we might have that might ruin the shot. Next up, we've got shutter per step, as well as the interval of shutters, both set to 1 here. And I'm not really sure for my application why I'd ever need to shoot more than 1 per step. So yeah, I don't know if you do know of a reason why. If you are a bit more experienced than maybe I am, maybe you could let me know why you'd want to do that. Maybe for redundancy, I don't know. Next is backlash, and if you're unsure of your backlash, the instructions say to set it to 220. And this is going to help for your overlap as far as I know. So if you don't know, if you're not super particular, you can just put in 220 and it seems to work just fine for me. Next is the run mode. You can either use a distance, which is a set distance that it's going to basically start and stop at, or you can actually dial in your focus from start to end. And this is the one I recommend because typically you know usually what you're looking for, and you can find the beginning of your subject and where you want the focus to start, and also the end. So that's the one I use so far 100% of the time. The distance really doesn't make much sense for me, but again, if there's another application that I'm not aware of, maybe yeah, consider that. Next is the step length, and this is going to be basically the amount that it's going to move per step. So I've got it set to 0.1 millimeters, so 1/10 of a millimeter, very small amount. And this is for somewhere between 2.5 to 5 times magnification. I find that that is kind of what I'm looking for, and that's going to vary depending on your aperture, your lens, and your magnification basically. And it's pretty much as simple as that. You can click on here to either have a beep and also return to the start if you wanted to do that. And you hit confirm, and it's going to send your basically all of your settings to the unit so it knows exactly what you're looking for. Here is our page 2. If you just cycle over to the right, you're going to see these options for your control of the unit itself in real time. You can move it forwards, you can move it backwards.
And you can also set your start and finish along with something called backlash compensation, which we'll talk about in a second. So this is the one I use and I really like, just the ease of use out of this. You can basically set a start point, go either going back or forward, find the point that you want to start at, hit start, and then you're going to move forward until you are happy with where you want it to be, whether it's a centimeter or 1.7 or 5 centimeters. And then you're going to hit set end, and it's going to basically show you you're going to be moving a total of, in this case, 2.9 millimeters with a total steps of 29, and that whole thing is going to take 120 seconds. So that's easy enough to understand. There is another unit of measurements, millimeters and which is a much smaller unit of measurement. And this is really going to be for when you're really getting into high magnification stuff. But for the most part, if you're a beginner or if you aren't having to deal with hugely high magnification ratios, well, just stick to millimeters. It's faster and it's easier. And once that's done, you can hit backlash compensation. It's basically going to take the slack out of the motor and your camera and whatnot, so there's no overlap. Then you're going to hit run, and it's going to do its thing. Make sure everything's connected. Of course, your cord to your camera, it's powered up, and you have your Bluetooth module activated, and it's going to be able to talk to this app, and it's going to say, hey, you're connected as soon as you open it up. I've never had an issue with connectivity or anything. So you're just going to hit that run button. It's going to go through. You can leave the room. You can come back later, because sometimes if you're shooting a few hundred photos or something, it's going to take some time, especially if you do have that feature where it's going to take some time in between to settle. Well, yeah, you could be there for a while. It's literally that simple. And on page 3 here, you've got a calculator, and depending on the sensor you have and the lens you're using and the aperture you're using, you can hit calculate, and it's going to show you kind of what to expect in terms of your overlap and the step size that you want to be looking for. So yeah, it can get very complicated or as simple as you want to make it. Trial and error for me is the best way. And on page 4, there's a help section, which basically gives you all the breakdown of everything that you're kind of looking for, everything we just kind of talked about. I don't really like the way it's laid out here, but it is what it is. It's pretty easy to understand. So if you do get stuck and you want to check this out, then pretty much this is going to be your help section. And that's 4 of 4 of the app. Quite simple. Page 3, the calculator. Page 2, your controls, basically real time. And then on page 1 is going to be your settings. And that's pretty much it. That's how you use the Wemacro app. So it's quite easy, guys. And like I said, if you wanted to get more complex, you can hook it right up to your computer if you have a computer nearby. But if you don't, if you're on the move or something and you want just the ease of use of the app, I think it's fantastic. No complaints here so far. And it's really that easy.
So wrapping up, guys, some considerations and recommendations for you regarding everything macro. Do I recommend the Wemacro Rail for you? Well, I think it's a great product at a great price point, and if you are getting serious about macro photography, I think it's a great option. So the ease of use is decent. There's lots of room to grow into, but if you are somebody just getting started into macro, I think you should probably have some decent knowledge and experience before jumping into something like this, because it is very time consuming, tedious, oftentimes frustrating, but very rewarding at the same time. So you've been warned. In terms of accessories, something at the bare minimum to make things just a little bit easier for your life when you're adjusting. This Z clamp here, like I showed you earlier, is a great inexpensive option, but yeah, the sky is the limit. In terms of lenses, it really depends on what kind of camera you're shooting with, what brand. I shoot with Sony currently, and 2 lenses that I can completely recommend to you, and you can check out my full in-depth review on each. For somebody who's maybe just getting started out or looking for something that's quite versatile, the Sony 90mm f2.8 macro, and this shoots at 1:1 magnification ratio, which means it's a great starter macro lens. It's autofocus lens, and it's just a great overall package. So check that thing out if you're looking for a decent all-around macro lens. And if you are looking for something a little bit more extreme and definitely more intermediate to expert, I'd recommend checking out the Laowa 25mm f2.8 macro. It's a 2.5 to 5 times extreme macro photography lens, and this thing is completely manual. There's no autofocus, and there's a fixed working distance. So it is a lot more kind of tedious and difficult to work with, but it's just really cool when you can zoom in 5 times magnification and just shoot things that you've always wanted to see but you couldn't. This thing's just awesome. Check those guys out. I'll link the reviews up there for you somewhere for you to check out. And if you wanted to pick up the Wemacro Rail, I'll drop affiliate links down there as well. And there might even be a discount code or something for you. If you have any questions or comments, make sure you drop them down in the comments, guys. I really hope this video helped you out. And if it did, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, join the community. Like always, make mistakes, be yourself, and get out there and take some more pictures. See you next time.